This time, our story is about Cleopatra, a powerful queen and the last pharaoh of ancient Egypt. As you listen, I invite you to relax and imagine each part of her life. Let's begin the journey of Cleopatra. Chapter 1. The Birth of a Future Queen. Cleopatra was born in the year 69 BCE in Alexandria, Egypt. Her full name was Cleopatra VII Philopator. She was part of the Ptolemaic dynasty, a royal Greek family that ruled Egypt. This family had ruled Egypt for almost 300 years. They came from the time of Alexander the Great. Cleopatra's family spoke Greek, not Egyptian, but she was different from many in her family. She learned the Egyptian language. She also studied many others. She was smart, curious, and full of energy. From a young age, she loved books and learning. Her father was King Ptolemy XII. He ruled Egypt during a very difficult time. The kingdom had many problems. There were fights inside the family. There were also problems with the Roman Empire. Rome was becoming stronger and wanted more control over Egypt. Cleopatra had two older sisters and two younger brothers. In royal families, brothers and sisters often fought for the crown. Power and control were more important than love. Cleopatra watched all of this closely as a child. She saw how dangerous the royal life could be. The people of Egypt were not always happy with the royal family. Sometimes they protested. Sometimes they were angry about money or taxes. Cleopatra's father had to leave Egypt for a short time. He lost power and later returned with Roman help. Cleopatra never forgot that Rome helped bring her father back. She also saw how strong words could be. Her father often used music, speeches, and gold to stay in power. Cleopatra learned to speak well. She learned to use charm like her father, but she was also learning to think deeply. She was preparing for her own future. As a girl, Cleopatra studied science, politics, and religion. She read in the famous Library of Alexandria. She knew about the stars, the planets, and how people lived in other countries. She learned how to lead. She learned how to listen. And she learned how to survive. Her early years were filled with noise, books, and voices of adults talking about power. In her heart, Cleopatra dreamed of being more than just a queen. She wanted to protect Egypt. She wanted to be a strong and clever leader. That is how the life journey of Cleopatra began. Chapter 2. Growing up in a royal palace. Cleopatra grew up in the great palace of Alexandria. The palace was full of beauty, music, and color. It had high walls, marble floors, and golden rooms. There were gardens, fountains, and large halls with bright lights. It was a place for kings and queens. She did not grow up like a normal child. Every day, Cleopatra was watched by teachers, guards, and servants. She had to speak clearly, sit tall, and walk like a queen. Every word, every step was important. She was always learning. Her education was one of the best in the world. She had Greek teachers who taught her literature, science, and philosophy. She also studied languages. Cleopatra could speak at least 7 languages. These included Egyptian, Greek, and Latin. She used these to talk to people from many places. Her favorite place was the Library of Alexandria. It had thousands of scrolls with ancient knowledge. Cleopatra read about history, nature, medicine, and the stars. She loved learning about other lands. She also learned how other leaders ruled their people. In the palace, Cleopatra learned about politics early. She heard secret meetings between her father and his advisors. She listened as they talked about taxes, enemies, and the Romans. She stayed quiet but remembered everything. She knew that power could change fast. There were also many dangers in the palace. Royal family members often became enemies. Brothers and sisters did not trust each other. Some wanted the crown for themselves. Cleopatra watched these fights closely. She learned to speak carefully. She learned when to act and when to wait. As a young girl, Cleopatra began to understand fear. Once, her father was forced to leave Egypt. Cleopatra and her siblings stayed behind. People protested in the streets. Some called for a new king. It was not safe for her family. This experience stayed with her forever. Later, her father returned to the throne with help from Rome. Cleopatra saw Roman soldiers in Egypt. She saw their strength and power. She knew they were not going to leave. From that moment, Cleopatra knew she would one day need to deal with Rome. Cleopatra also learned how to win people's hearts. She was kind to the people who served her. She remembered their names and listened to their stories. She gave gifts, smiled often, and showed respect. These small acts made people love her. She was already becoming a leader. By the time Cleopatra was a teenager, she was wise beyond her years. She understood books, politics, and people. She could speak with both the rich and the poor. She could stand in front of men twice her age and not be afraid. She was getting ready for something big. Her days were full of learning, watching, and preparing. Each sunrise brought new lessons. Each sunset brought dreams of her future. Cleopatra was not just a girl in a palace. She was a queen in the making. Chapter 3. A family full of secrets. Cleopatra's family was not like a normal family. They were royal, and they were often at war, with other countries and with each other. Her family was part of the Ptolemaic dynasty, a line of Greek rulers who ruled Egypt after Alexander the Great. But even though they ruled Egypt, they kept many Greek customs. In Cleopatra's house, family members did not always show love. They sometimes became enemies. They did not trust each other. Power made people lie, cheat, and fight. Cleopatra knew this. She grew up watching it happen. Her father, King Ptolemy XII, had a difficult rule. Many Egyptians did not like him. He had to pay money to Rome to keep his throne. To do that, he raised taxes. This made the people angry. They said he was weak. Some wanted to replace him with his daughter, Cleopatra's older sister. That sister's name was Berenice. When Cleopatra was about 10 years old, her father was forced to leave Egypt. While he was gone, Berenice became queen. She ruled for a short time, but when Ptolemy XII returned with Roman soldiers, he took back the crown and punished her. Berenice was killed. Cleopatra saw what happened to her sister. She understood the danger. If you lost power, you could lose your life. She learned that being royal could also mean being alone. Later, her father made Cleopatra and her younger brother Ptolemy XIII the next rulers. This was a tradition. In their family, a brother and sister could rule together, but it also meant more secrets and more danger. After her father died, Cleopatra and her brother were named co-rulers. At the time, Cleopatra was about 18 years old. Her brother was just 10. In name, they ruled together. But in truth, Cleopatra made most of the decisions. At first, things were peaceful. Cleopatra tried to rule wisely. She listened to advisors. She spoke to the people. She showed respect to Egyptian gods. She even wore Egyptian clothes and learned Egyptian traditions. This made the people love her more. But some men around her brother did not like this. They wanted the young king to have full power. They told him not to trust Cleopatra. They said she wanted to rule alone. Tension grew inside the palace. Cleopatra could feel the danger coming closer. Soon, the conflict became too strong. Cleopatra was forced to leave the palace. She went into hiding, but she did not give up. She knew how to wait. She knew how to plan. And she believed she would return. This was a hard time for Cleopatra. She had no army, no throne, and no safety. But she had her mind. She used letters, messages, and friends to keep watch. She was always thinking. She was preparing for her next move. The palace, once her home, was now filled with whispers against her. Her young brother sat on the throne, but Cleopatra knew the crown was not safe in his hands. Egypt needed a strong leader, and she still believed she could be that leader. Chapter 4. Cleopatra becomes queen. Cleopatra was now in exile. That means she was no longer welcome in the royal palace. She had no throne, no army, and no power. But she did not stop believing in her dream. She still saw herself as the true ruler of Egypt. She stayed near the border of Egypt. She waited and watched. She sent messages to people inside the palace. Some still supported her. Others were afraid. But Cleopatra knew that one moment could change everything. She was ready to act when that moment came. Then something big happened. In 48 BCE, a great Roman general came to Alexandria. His name was Julius Caesar. He came from Rome to solve a conflict between Cleopatra and her brother Ptolemy XIII. Rome was now deeply involved in Egyptian politics. Caesar wanted peace between the two rulers. Cleopatra saw this as her chance. She had to speak to Caesar, but it was dangerous. Her enemies in the palace would not let her enter. So she came up with a clever plan. She had herself wrapped in a carpet, or some say a sack, and sent as a gift to Caesar. When the carpet was opened, Cleopatra stepped out. Caesar was surprised and impressed. He saw her beauty, her confidence, and her intelligence. Cleopatra knew how to speak well. She used charm, but also reason. She explained her side of the story. Caesar listened carefully. He liked strong people, and Cleopatra was strong. He agreed to help her. Soon, a fight broke out between the two royal sides. Caesar and Cleopatra fought against Ptolemy XIII and his advisors. The battle took place in the streets and around the palace. After many days of fighting, Ptolemy XIII was killed. He drowned in the Nile River while trying to escape. Now Cleopatra could take back the throne. She was queen once again. She ruled Egypt with a younger brother, Ptolemy XIV. But everyone knew Cleopatra held the real power. Cleopatra was now about 21 years old. She had already lost her father, seen her sister killed, and been forced out of her own palace. But she came back. She did not just return. She ruled stronger than ever. She was a queen not just in name, but in action. She gave gifts to the people of Alexandria. She lowered taxes. She honored the gods. She spoke to the public in Egyptian. The people were happy. They trusted her. They saw her not just as a ruler, but as one of them. Inside the palace, Cleopatra was busy every day. She met with advisors. She planned new projects. She started rebuilding the power of Egypt. She also stayed close to Julius Caesar. Together, they talked about the future of both Egypt and Rome. Her journey back to the throne showed her strength. It also showed her heart. She did not give up when she was in danger. She waited, planned, and acted. Now, Cleopatra was queen of Egypt once more, and this time, she would rule her way. Chapter 5. A clever and brave ruler. Cleopatra was now queen again, and she was ready to lead. She ruled Egypt with strength, kindness, and great intelligence. She knew how to manage people, money, and power. She also knew that Egypt must stay strong to stay free from Rome's full control. She started to rebuild the country. Cleopatra worked hard to bring back order. She fixed problems in the economy. She made sure farmers had seeds and water. She lowered some taxes. This helped the people and made her popular. They began to see her as a true Egyptian queen. Cleopatra also traveled around Egypt. She visited temples and spoke with priests. She gave gold to support local traditions. She made people feel respected and heard. She listened to their problems and helped them. Her love for Egypt showed in everything she did. At the same time, Cleopatra knew she had to deal with Rome. Egypt was rich and Rome was powerful. But Cleopatra was not afraid. She understood Roman politics. She knew how to speak to Roman leaders. She was young, but she was already an expert in diplomacy. She continued her connection with Julius Caesar. He stayed in Egypt for some time. They shared many talks about the future. Cleopatra gave birth to a son. She named him Caesarion, which means Little Caesar. Many believed Caesar was the father. Cleopatra saw this child as Egypt's future king. Some people in Rome did not like this. They thought Cleopatra wanted power in Rome too. But Cleopatra said she only wanted what was best for Egypt. She stayed focused on her people. Her palace became full of activity. Poets, thinkers, builders, and teachers came to her court. She also started to build great monuments. She built statues and temples to show the greatness of her rule. She wanted her name and image to be remembered forever. In these statues, she wore both Greek and Egyptian clothing. She wanted to show that she was a queen for all people. Cleopatra was not just clever in politics. She was also brave in action. There was once a famine in Egypt. Crops did not grow. People were hungry. Cleopatra opened the palace stores. She gave food to the poor. She used her own wealth to help others. The people loved her even more. She was also a smart speaker. Cleopatra knew how to speak in public. She gave powerful speeches. Her voice was soft but clear. She chose her words with care. She spoke to kings, priests, and farmers in ways they could understand. By the time she was 25 years old, Cleopatra had done many great things. She had returned to power, rebuilt her country, and given hope to her people. She showed that a young woman could rule a kingdom. She showed the world what it meant to be a queen. Chapter 6. Meeting Julius Caesar. Julius Caesar was one of the most powerful men in the world. He was a Roman general and leader. He had many enemies, but also great support in Rome. When he came to Egypt in 48 BCE, everything changed for Cleopatra, and for Caesar too. Their first meeting was unusual. Cleopatra arrived secretly, hidden in a carpet or a sack. Her enemies in the palace had tried to stop her, but she was brave. She used this trick to surprise Caesar. When he saw her, he was amazed. She was young, but full of confidence. Cleopatra spoke to Caesar in a calm and clever way. She explained her story and asked for help. Caesar listened. He was not only surprised by her beauty, he was impressed by her mind. Cleopatra used clear words. She showed she understood Egypt's problems. She also understood Rome. Caesar decided to help her. He wanted to bring peace to Egypt. He believed Cleopatra could be a strong ruler. Together, they worked to take back her throne. It was not easy. A war started in Alexandria. Soldiers fought in the streets and near the royal palace. After days of fighting, Caesar's army won. Cleopatra's brother, Ptolemy XIII, was killed. He drowned in the Nile River during the battle. Now, Cleopatra was queen again. Caesar helped place her back on the throne. He stayed in Egypt for several months after that. During this time, Cleopatra and Caesar grew close. They spent many days together. They sailed on the Nile River. They visited temples and talked for hours. They both loved books, ideas, and politics. They were very different, but they understood each other. Their relationship became romantic. In 47 BCE, Cleopatra gave birth to a baby boy. His name was Caesarion. She said he was the son of Julius Caesar. Caesar never fully said he was the father, but many people believed it. Cleopatra saw Caesarion as the next great ruler of Egypt. Cleopatra visited Rome with Caesarion in 46 BCE. She stayed in Caesar's home in Rome. Some Roman people did not like this. They called her a foreign queen. They said she was trying to bring her power to Rome. Cleopatra stayed quiet. She watched and listened. She met Roman leaders, thinkers, and artists. She learned more about how Rome worked. She knew this knowledge could help Egypt. She also wanted people to see her as a true ruler, not just a woman from the East. But her time in Rome did not last long. In 44 BCE, something terrible happened. Julius Caesar was killed by a group of Roman senators. They stabbed him because they feared he had too much power. Cleopatra was shocked and heartbroken. She quickly returned to Egypt with her son. Now, Cleopatra was alone again. She had lost her strongest ally. Rome was in chaos. But Cleopatra stayed strong. She knew she must protect Egypt and Caesarion. Her next steps would decide the future of her kingdom. And soon, she would meet another powerful Roman leader. Chapter 7. Love and Politics. After Julius Caesar's death, Cleopatra returned to Egypt. She was full of sorrow, but she did not give up. She still had her son, Caesarion. She believed he could one day rule Egypt, and maybe even Rome. But the world was changing again. Rome was now in a power struggle. Caesar's death left a large hole in Roman leadership. His old friends and enemies started to fight. One of those friends was Mark Antony, a brave and important Roman general. He was strong in battle and popular with the Roman army. He helped form a new group of leaders, called the Second Triumvirate. Mark Antony and Cleopatra first met a few years later. He invited her to meet him in Tarsus, a city in present-day Turkey. Cleopatra knew this meeting was very important. She planned everything carefully. She arrived in a golden boat with purple sails. Musicians played music, and perfumes filled the air. When Mark Antony saw Cleopatra, he was amazed. She looked like a goddess. She wore fine clothes and jewels. But Cleopatra did not just show beauty. She spoke with power. She talked about Egypt, about Rome, and about their futures. Antony listened. He was drawn to her charm and her mind. Soon after, their relationship began. Cleopatra invited Antony to Alexandria. He came and he stayed for a long time. They spent time enjoying parties, music, and poetry, but they also talked about politics. Cleopatra needed Antony's support. Antony needed Egypt's money and ships. Together, they made a strong team. Cleopatra had the wealth. Antony had the army. They made plans for war, trade, and power. Cleopatra believed this bond could help Egypt stay strong and free. She wanted Caesarion to become the next great ruler. They had children together, twins, and later another son. Cleopatra now had 4 children. She lived in a beautiful palace full of art, music, and knowledge. But she also had to think about war. Rome was not at peace, and some Roman leaders did not like her. Back in Rome, Octavian, Caesar's adopted son, was rising in power. He saw Cleopatra as a threat. He said she wanted to take over Rome with Antony. He used fear to gain support. He told the people that Antony was no longer loyal to Rome. Antony, who spent more time in Egypt, lost trust in some parts of Rome. He loved Cleopatra, but that love also brought danger. War between Octavian and Antony was coming. Cleopatra knew this war would decide the future, for Egypt, for Rome, and for her children. Still, she stayed calm. She gave money and soldiers to help Antony. She made speeches to her people. She told them to be strong and united. Cleopatra was not just a queen in love. She was a queen ready to fight for her land. Chapter 8. The Rise of Rome. The Fight for Egypt. The power in Rome was changing fast. After Julius Caesar's death, many people wanted control. At first, Rome was ruled by 3 men, Mark Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus. But soon, the real power struggle was between 2 men, Mark Antony and Octavian. Octavian was clever and patient. He used words like weapons. He told the Roman people that Mark Antony had become weak. He said Cleopatra was using Antony to take power from Rome. These stories spread quickly. The Roman Senate began to fear Cleopatra. Back in Egypt, Cleopatra was watching everything. She knew a war was coming. She was not afraid. She believed in her plan. She believed that Egypt, with Antony, could stand against Rome. She prepared ships, weapons, and food. She trained soldiers. She got ready. Mark Antony and Cleopatra joined their forces. They had a large army and a powerful navy. In the year 31 BCE, they sailed to Greece. There, they faced Octavian in a great sea battle. This was called the Battle of Actium. It was one of the most famous battles in ancient history. Cleopatra brought many Egyptian ships. She also brought supplies and gold. She stood by Antony's side, not just as a lover, but as a queen. They believed they could win, but things did not go as planned. Octavian's fleet was strong and smart. He cut off their ships and blocked their escape. In the middle of the battle, Cleopatra made a fast decision. She turned her ship and left the fight. Antony saw this and followed her. Some say they planned to escape together. Others say the battle confused them. But without their leaders, the rest of the army lost hope. Octavian won the battle. After this loss, Antony and Cleopatra returned to Egypt. Their armies were smaller now. Their future was uncertain. Cleopatra went to her palace in Alexandria. She tried to stay calm. She still believed she could find a way to survive. She met with advisors. She sent messages to Octavian. She offered gifts. She asked if she could keep Egypt safe. She also wanted her children to be protected. But Octavian had made up his mind. He wanted to take Egypt for Rome. He wanted to end the rule of Cleopatra and Antony. In these final months, Cleopatra stayed strong. She checked her ships. She counted her gold. She made plans for her children. She even began to build her tomb. She said, "If I must die, I will die as a queen." This time in her life was full of fear and pressure. But Cleopatra still stood tall. She wore her crown. She gave orders. She walked through the palace with pride. Even in danger, she acted like a true ruler. Chapter 9. Cleopatra and Mark Antony. After the Battle of Actium, Cleopatra and Mark Antony were both back in Egypt. They had lost many ships and soldiers. The Roman army, led by Octavian, was getting closer. The situation was serious, but Cleopatra and Antony did not give up. They returned to Alexandria, their royal city. Cleopatra tried to keep life in the palace calm. She wore fine clothes. She still held meetings. She walked through the palace like a queen. But deep in her heart, she knew their time was running out. Mark Antony was tired and sad. He had lost the battle. Many of his men had left him. Some joined Octavian, Others ran away, but Cleopatra stayed with him. She comforted him. She reminded him of all they had done together. Antony spent more time alone. He trained a few soldiers. He talked about plans, but he knew he could not defeat Rome now. Still, Cleopatra and Antony tried to stay hopeful. They believed there might still be a way to protect Egypt and their children. Cleopatra sent messages to Octavian. She said she would give him treasure. She asked him to let her keep Egypt. She offered to send Caesarion away for safety. She did everything she could to save her kingdom. But Octavian was not interested in peace. He wanted to take Egypt. In the summer of 30 BCE, Octavian's army arrived outside Alexandria. The final days had come. Cleopatra stayed in her palace. She looked out at the city and the sea. She prepared her tomb. She filled it with gold, food, and fine clothes. She said, "If I cannot rule in life, I will be queen in death." One day, Cleopatra received false news. She was told that Mark Antony had died. She was heartbroken. She locked herself in her room and cried. But the news was not true. Antony was still alive. When Antony heard that Cleopatra was dead, he was filled with sorrow. He could not live without her. He stabbed himself with his sword, but he did not die right away. His friends carried him to Cleopatra's room. Cleopatra held Antony in her arms as he died. He looked into her eyes and said, "Do not be sad. I have done what I could." Those were his last words. Cleopatra kissed him one last time. Then he was gone. Now Cleopatra was alone. She had lost her love. She had lost her kingdom, but she still had her pride. Octavian entered the city. He sent guards to watch Cleopatra. She was now a prisoner in her own palace. She spoke with Octavian. He wanted to take her to Rome in chains. He wanted to show her to the Roman people as a prize of war. Cleopatra knew she could not let that happen. She was a queen, not a prisoner. Chapter 10. War and Tragedy. The city of Alexandria was quiet. Roman soldiers stood outside the palace. Inside, Cleopatra sat in her private room. Her heart was heavy. She had lost Mark Antony. Now, Octavian wanted to take her to Rome. But Cleopatra was not ready to be part of someone else's show. She still wore her crown. She still dressed like a queen. But her world had changed. She no longer had power. She had only her name, her peed, and her plan. She thought about her children. She thought about her country. She thought about the past. Octavian sent guards to watch her day and night. Cleopatra was not allowed to leave, but she still found a way to send secret messages. She asked trusted servants to help her prepare for the end. She would not be taken to Rome in chains. She visited her tomb one last time. It was filled with gold, statues, and food. She had prepared it for weeks. She wanted to be remembered not as a prisoner, but as a queen of Egypt. A queen who ruled with courage, love, and wisdom. One day, Cleopatra asked her servants to bring her a basket. Inside the basket were figs and something hidden. Some stories say it was a small cobra, an asp, the snake used in royal deaths. Others believe she used poison hidden in a pin. The truth is still a mystery. Cleopatra was 39 years old. She dressed in her finest clothes. She wore a royal robe and a crown. She lay down in her tomb, with her servants by her side. They all knew this was the end. One by one, they died quietly. Cleopatra's death was peaceful, full of silence and dignity. When Octavian heard the news, he was angry, but also respectful. He had lost the chance to take her to Rome, but he allowed her to be buried next to Mark Antony, just as she had wished. Their tomb was sealed with care. Their love and story became part of history. Caesarion, Cleopatra's son with Julius Caesar, was killed soon after. Octavian did not want any child of Caesar to rule Egypt. Cleopatra's other children were taken to Rome. They were raised there and later lived quiet lives. With Cleopatra's death, the time of the pharaohs ended. Egypt became part of the Roman Empire. It would never again have its own ruler. Cleopatra was the last pharaoh. Her story was now complete, but people never forgot her. Poets, writers, and painters told her story for thousands of years. Some called her a beauty, others called her a clever queen, but all agreed. Cleopatra was a woman of power, grace, and strength. Her life was full of danger and change. From the golden halls of Alexandria to the quiet tomb by the sea, Cleopatra lived as a true queen. She fought for her land, she followed her heart, and in the end, she made her own choice. Chapter 11. The Final Days. After Cleopatra's death, the palace of Alexandria grew quiet. The rooms where once there were songs, meetings, and laughter now held only silence. The last queen of Egypt was gone. Roman soldiers walked through the city. They looked at the statues, the temples, and the library. Egypt now belonged to Rome. Octavian took full control of the land. He called it a Roman province. He sent new governors and Roman officials to rule. The Egyptians were sad. They had lost more than a queen. They had lost their independence. A long chapter in history had come to an end. Cleopatra's tomb was sealed. It stood near the sea, built with stone and gold. Inside, she lay next to Mark Antony. They had died in love, and now they rested side by side. No one knows exactly where the tomb is today. It has never been found, but people still search for it. Cleopatra's children were taken to Rome. Her daughter, Cleopatra Selene, grew up in the home of Octavia, Mark Antony's former wife and Octavian's sister. Octavia was kind to the children. She gave them education, food, and safety. Cleopatra Selene later married a king in North Africa and became a queen herself. Cleopatra's other two children also lived quietly in Rome. They were not seen as threats, but Caesarion, Cleopatra's son with Julius Caesar, did not survive. Octavian believed that Caesarion might claim to be Caesar's true heir. He could not allow that. Caesarion was killed, ending the royal bloodline of Cleopatra. With no more Egyptian rulers, the great time of the pharaohs was truly over. Cleopatra had been the last. For over 3,000 years, Egypt had kings and queens. They built pyramids, temples, and cities. But now, it was ruled by foreigners. Still, Cleopatra's name stayed alive. Her story traveled far beyond Egypt. Roman writers told her story. Greek poets sang of her beauty and power. Later, Shakespeare wrote a play about her. In books and paintings, she became a symbol of love, power, and choice. In her final days, Cleopatra showed great strength. She faced the fall of her kingdom with calm. She made her own decisions. She said goodbye to her children. She did not cry in public. She did not ask for help. She died with pride. Many years later, people still talk about her. They ask, who was she really? Was she only beautiful? Was she only clever? Or was she something more? The truth is, Cleopatra was all of these things. She was a real person, living in a hard time, trying to protect her people. Her final days were sad, but also full of dignity. She did not let others write the end of her story. She wrote it herself, with courage, silence, and a crown on her head. Chapter 12. A Legacy That Lives On. Centuries have passed since Cleopatra lived and ruled, but her name is still remembered around the world. People still talk about her charm, her wisdom, and her choices. Cleopatra became more than a queen. She became a legend. She ruled Egypt at a time when it was hard for a woman to lead, but she did it with strength and care. She spoke many languages. She studied science, law, and history. She made smart decisions for her people. She worked with powerful leaders like Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. Even though her story ended in sadness, people admire her courage. Cleopatra did not give up when things went wrong. She kept fighting. She kept thinking. She always tried to do what was best for her country. Over time, her story became famous in books, plays, and movies. Poets wrote about her love for Caesar and Antony. Painters showed her beauty. Filmmakers showed her life on screen. But the real Cleopatra was more than these images. She was not just a woman who loved powerful men. She was a ruler, a mother, and a leader with her own voice. Cleopatra's story has helped people learn about Egypt. Through her life, many people discovered the pyramids, the Nile River, and the Library of Alexandria. She made people around the world look toward Egypt with wonder and respect. Today, scholars still study her life. They read old scrolls and coins with her image. They try to understand her more clearly. Many questions remain. Where is her tomb? What did she truly look like? What words did she say in her last moments? These questions may never be answered, but the mystery only adds to her legend. In museums around the world, you can still see her face on coins and statues. These are not drawings. They are real images from her time. They show a strong, intelligent woman. Not perfect, not magic, but real. Cleopatra's life journey has touched millions. English learners listen to her story to build their language skills. They enjoy her story for English listening practice. They learn English through story, through the real story of a queen who made history. Her life reminds us of how one person can shape the world. She lived over 2,000 years ago, but her legacy still lives on. She is remembered not just in Egypt, but across every continent. Her name is known in schools, in books, and in stories passed from generation to generation. Cleopatra was the last pharaoh of Egypt, but she was also the beginning of something greater, a symbol of strength, leadership, and the power of the human spirit. Thank you for joining this journey through the life of Cleopatra.